Ambassador Jake Morrison sat in his small office on Nexus Prime watching the morning traffic of alien ships pass by his window. The view never got old even after 3 years of representing Earth in this massive space station that served as the galaxy's diplomatic center. Today felt different, though, because his communication device had been buzzing, non-stop since dawn with urgent messages from species he rarely heard from. The first message came from the Valdari Empire, whose telepathic representatives usually communicated directly mind-to-mind with other council members. They never bothered with primitive audio transmissions to humans, since they considered human minds too simple to handle their advanced thoughts. The message was brief and cold, stating that an emergency session of the Galactic Council would convene in 6 hours to address matters of extreme urgency. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his coffee, which had gone cold hours ago. Earth's membership in the Galactic Council was still new and somewhat controversial. Most of the 12 ancient civilizations that ruled this part of the galaxy viewed humans as primitive newcomers who had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. The Valdari had telepathic abilities that let them communicate across star systems. The Kronik had technology so advanced it seemed like magic to most species. The Bruthan were warriors who had conquered dozens of systems through pure military might. Then there were humans who had nothing special except stubborn determination and a tendency to survive things that should have killed them. Jake often wondered if Earth's council seat was just a polite gesture from species who felt sorry for the struggling human colonies on the galaxy's frontier. His assistant Linda Carter rushed into the office carrying a stack of data tablets and looking more worried than Jake had ever seen her. Linda had worked in galactic diplomacy for 15 years before Earth even joined the council, and she understood alien politics better than most humans. When Linda looked scared, it usually meant something very bad was happening. She dropped the tablets on his desk and pointed to the top one, which showed a star map of the galaxy's outer rim. Red markers indicated star systems, and Jake counted at least 30 of them scattered across different sectors. What made his stomach drop was that half of those red markers were blinking, which meant they were no longer responding to any communications. Jake picked up the tablet and scrolled through the reports. The first missing system was detected 3 weeks ago, when a Kronik trade convoy failed to arrive at its destination. Search ships were sent to investigate, but found nothing where the Kepler 442 system should have been. Not destroyed planets or debris fields, but absolutely nothing, as if the entire solar system had been erased from existence. More systems began disappearing over the following weeks. Each time reconnaissance ships were dispatched, and each time those ships also vanished without sending any distress signals or final transmissions. The missing systems came from territories controlled by different species, so it was not some local conflict or pirate activity. Linda sat down across from his desk and pulled up a 3-dimensional map that showed the pattern of disappearances over time. Jake studied the holographic display and felt a chill run down his spine. The missing systems were not random at all, but formed a perfect spiral pattern starting from the galaxy's edge and moving slowly inward toward the core where most civilized worlds were located. 20 minutes before the council session, Jake made his way through the corridors of Nexus Prime toward the Great Assembly Hall. The space station was enormous, with sections dedicated to each member species and their specific environmental needs. The Valdari section maintained low gravity and purple lighting that matched their homeworld. The Kronik area buzzed with the sound of advanced machinery and energy fields. The Bruthan quarter echoed with the sounds of combat training and war chants. The human section was smaller than most others and designed to feel like Earth, with normal gravity and lighting that reminded Jake of home. As he walked toward the assembly hall, he passed representatives from various species who either ignored him completely or gave him looks that suggested they wondered why he was even here. The assembly hall was a massive circular chamber with seating arranged in concentric rings around a central speaking platform. Each species had their designated area with environmental controls suited to their biology. The human section consisted of just 5 seats in the outer ring, far from the center where the real power players sat. Jake took his place and looked around at the other representatives. The Valdari ambassador Zethkalar was a tall, pale being with large dark eyes, who seemed to be staring at nothing, while his mind communicated with others telepathically. The Kronik overseer Malenth looked more like a living machine than a biological creature with metallic skin and glowing blue circuits running along his arms. The Bruthan war chief Gorthmak was exactly what humans expected from a warrior race standing, nearly 8 feet tall with thick armor and scars covering his visible skin. Representatives from the other 8 species filled their sections, creating an impressive display of galactic diversity that reminded Jake how young and small humanity was in comparison. The session began with formal announcements and procedural matters but quickly moved to the crisis at hand. The Valdari representative stood and began speaking in his species' musical language, while a translation device converted his words to standard galactic. He described the missing systems and the failed reconnaissance missions with clinical detachment, as if discussing weather patterns rather than the disappearance of billions of lives. The Kronek overseer presented detailed sensor data, showing the complete absence of matter in the affected areas. Not even cosmic dust or background radiation remained, where entire solar systems had once existed. The precision required for such complete destruction was beyond anything in their technological databases. Other representatives offered theories, ranging from secret weapons tests to natural phenomena, but Jake noticed something they were all missing. He studied the pattern displayed on the central hologram and realized the spiral was not random but followed mathematical principles that suggested intelligence behind the attacks. As arguments broke out between different factions about territorial disputes and resource allocation, Jake stood up from his seat in the outer ring. The hall gradually fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. He walked to the central platform and activated the holographic display, showing the missing systems. Using simple gestures, he highlighted the spiral pattern and began explaining what he observed. The disappearances followed a precise mathematical sequence moving inward at a predictable rate. If the pattern continued, the next targets would be major industrial worlds in the mid-rim territories. Before Jake could finish his analysis, the chamber erupted in chaos. Several species accused others of orchestrating the attacks, while some dismissed human observations as primitive speculation. The Valdari ambassador broadcast telepathic messages that Jake could not understand but clearly expressed dismissal of human intelligence. The session was interrupted when emergency alarms began sounding throughout Nexus Prime. The central display switched to show incoming sensor data from the galaxy's early warning network. A massive energy signature had appeared at the edge of known space, moving toward inhabited systems at incredible speed. The final shock came when an ancient automated beacon suddenly activated after millions of years of silence. The beacon broadcast a message in a dead language that the station's computers struggled to translate. When the translation finally appeared on screens throughout the hall, Jake felt the temperature seem to drop as he read the words that would change everything. The message was simple and terrifying. The Devourers have returned. The emergency session of the Galactic Council ended in complete chaos, with representatives arguing and shouting accusations at each other, while the ancient beacon's message echoed through the assembly hall. Jake Morrison returned to his quarters feeling more frustrated than he had ever been in his diplomatic career. The other species treated humanity like children who had wandered into an adult conversation they could not possibly understand. 3 days later, everything changed when Dr. Lisa Hamilton arrived on Nexus Prime aboard a fast courier ship from Earth. Jake had known Lisa since their university days and respected her work as one of humanity's leading experts on alien archaeology. She looked exhausted from the long journey, but her eyes held the excitement that always appeared when she made an important discovery. They met in Jake's private office, where Lisa immediately activated a secure holographic projector and began displaying images that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. The images showed ancient ruins found on human frontier worlds that nobody had seen before. These were not the usual archaeological sites that dotted inhabited planets, but something far older and more mysterious. Lisa explained that human exploration teams had discovered these ruins on 17 different worlds over the past 2 years. The sites were always found deep underground or in remote locations that other species had never bothered to explore. What made them special was their age, which carbon dating and quantum analysis showed to be over 3 million years old. The ruins contained symbols and writings that took Earth's best linguists and computer systems months to decode. The language was unlike anything in the galactic databases and seemed to predate every known civilization by millions of years. When the translation work was finally completed, the messages they revealed sent shockwaves through Earth's scientific community. Jake studied the translated text that Lisa projected in the air between them. The ancient builders called themselves the First Vigil, and their warning spoke of something called the Harvesters, who came from beyond the galaxy in great cycles. These entities consumed everything in their path, including planets, stars, and entire civilizations, before moving on to the next galaxy. According to the ancient records, the Harvesters had swept through this galaxy at least twice before destroying countless species and leaving only empty space behind. The First Vigil had been the last civilization to face them in the previous cycle, and had used their final years to build warning systems and hidden messages for any future species that might evolve to face the same threat. The most disturbing part of the translations was the description of how the Harvesters operated. They did not simply destroy worlds, but consumed all matter and energy, leaving absolutely nothing behind. The process was described as harvesting, which explained the name the ancients had given them. Entire solar systems would be stripped of all material and converted into energy that fed the entities. Lisa showed Jake detailed scans of the ruins that revealed hidden chambers and devices that human technology could barely understand. The First Vigil had built these sites as more than just warning systems. They contained technological blueprints and strategic information about fighting an enemy that conventional weapons could not harm. Jake realized this information needed to reach the Galactic Council immediately, but he also knew the other species would not believe that humans had discovered something their own archaeologists had missed. The Valdari claimed their telepathic abilities let them sense ancient thoughts and memories across time. The Kronik had quantum sensors that could detect technological remnants from millions of years ago. When Jake presented Dr. Hamilton's findings to an emergency council session, the reaction was exactly what he expected. The Valdari ambassador dismissed the human claims as primitive misunderstandings of natural rock formations. The Kronik overseer stated that their deep space sensors would have detected any such ancient sites centuries ago during their initial surveys. The Bruthan war chief laughed and said that dead civilizations could not help against living enemies. Other representatives either ignored the presentation entirely or suggested that humans were making up stories to gain attention and importance in galactic affairs. Dr. Hamilton tried to provide more evidence by showing detailed scans and quantum dating results, but the council members had already made up their minds. The session was about to end in another round of arguments when Jake's communication device received an urgent transmission from Captain Roy Blake of the human exploration vessel UES Horizon. Captain Blake's message was brief and terrifying. His ship had been conducting routine surveys in the Kepler Nebula when they encountered something that matched the descriptions from the ancient warnings. A massive crystalline entity over a kilometer long had appeared near their position without any warning or energy signature that their sensors could detect. The entity did not attack the human ship, but instead began scanning it with beams of unknown energy. Captain Blake reported that his crew felt strange sensations during the scanning process, as if something was examining not just their technology, but their biological and mental patterns. The entity seemed to be learning about human capabilities and weaknesses. After several minutes of intensive scanning, the crystalline being simply vanished into hyperspace. Without any communication or hostile action, Captain Blake's ship was undamaged. But their computer systems had recorded energy, patterns, and scanning techniques that were completely unknown to human science. The council chamber fell silent as Captain Blake's report was displayed on the central screens. The scans showed clear images of the crystalline entity, which looked exactly like the descriptions found in the First Vigil warnings. The being was not made of any known matter but seemed to exist, partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. For the first time since the crisis began, the alien representatives showed genuine concern rather than dismissal. The Valdari ambassador admitted that their telepathic networks had detected no thoughts or emotions from the Kepler Nebula area, which suggested the entity operated on principles their minds could not comprehend. The Kronik overseer reviewed the energy readings and confirmed that the scanning techniques used by the entity were beyond their technological understanding. The pattern suggested capabilities that violated several fundamental laws of physics as they currently understood them. Jake seized the moment to propose that the Council form a joint task force to investigate the threat and coordinate defensive preparations. For once, the other species seemed willing to consider human suggestions, but their unity lasted only minutes before old rivalries and territorial disputes resurfaced. The Valdari insisted that their psychic abilities made them natural leaders for any investigation. The Kronek claimed their advanced technology was essential for understanding the threat. The Bruthen demanded military command of any defensive force that might be assembled. Jake watched in frustration as the Council dissolved into the same petty arguments that had plagued galactic politics for centuries. Each species wanted to lead the effort, but none were willing to follow others or share command authority. The ancient threat that had destroyed entire galaxies was returning, but the modern civilizations could not put aside their pride long enough to work together. That night, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He sent a coded message directly to Earth Command, bypassing normal diplomatic channels and requesting immediate military assistance. The message was simple but carried enormous implications for humanity's future in galactic affairs. Requested that Earth send their entire space fleet to Nexus Prime regardless of how small it might seem compared to the armadas of ancient alien civilizations. Jake also asked for General Patricia Woods, who had earned respect throughout human space for her tactical brilliance and ability to win battles against overwhelming odds. The response from Earth came 12 hours later with a single word that made Jake both proud and terrified of what was coming. Approved. General Patricia Woods arrived at Nexus Prime 5 days later, with 47 ships representing the entire active fleet of Earth's Space Navy. Jake Morrison watched from the observation deck as the human vessels took formation around the massive space station. Compared to the alien fleets that regularly visited Nexus Prime, the human armada looked tiny and primitive. The other council members were clearly amused by humanity's modest military display. The Valdari had thousands of sleek vessels that moved through space using telepathic navigation systems. The Kronek commanded fleets of geometric ships that seemed to bend space around them with advanced technology. The Bruthen war fleets were massive and heavily armed with enough firepower to destroy entire moons. General Woods met with Jake in his office before addressing the council. She was a small woman with graying hair and calm eyes that had seen too many battles. Patricia had earned her reputation during the frontier wars, when human colonies were constantly under attack from pirates and hostile alien raiders. She never won through superior firepower, but always found ways to defeat enemies who should have crushed her forces. Jake briefed Patricia on the situation, including the ancient warnings from Dr. Hamilton and the recent encounter with the crystalline entity. He also explained the political problems they faced with alien species who refused to work together or take human suggestions seriously. Patricia listened without interruption, then smiled in a way that made Jake both hopeful and nervous. When General Woods addressed the emergency council session, she began by acknowledging that humanity's fleet was small compared to the great armadas of the established civilizations. The alien representatives nodded with condescending agreement, as if pleased that humans finally understood their proper place in galactic affairs. Then Patricia surprised everyone by explaining why this apparent weakness was actually humanity's greatest strength. While other species had grown comfortable with overwhelming technological or military advantages, humans had spent their entire history learning to survive against impossible odds. Every major conflict in human history involved smaller forces finding ways to defeat larger, more powerful enemies. She displayed tactical analyses from Earth's military archives, showing battles where humans had won through creativity, adaptability, and willingness to use unconventional strategies. The other species studied these historical examples with growing interest as they realized human warfare was unlike anything in their own traditions. The Kronek relied on technological superiority to overwhelm opponents with advanced weapons and energy shields. The Bruthen used brute force and direct assault tactics that had worked for thousands of years. The Valdari coordinated their forces telepathically to achieve perfect unity of action. All of these approaches were predictable and followed established patterns. Human military doctrine was different because it assumed the enemy would always be stronger, faster, or more advanced than human forces. This assumption forced human commanders to develop tactics based on deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare. Patricia explained that these principles might be exactly what was needed to fight an enemy like the Harvesters. Dr. Hamilton joined the presentation to explain what the ancient warnings revealed about previous battles against the Harvesters. Every civilization that tried to meet them in direct combat was completely destroyed regardless of their technological or military advantages. The entities seemed to adapt instantly to any conventional attack and became stronger with each victory. The first vigil warnings suggested that the Harvesters could only be defeated through strategies they could not predict or understand. This meant using tactics that seemed illogical or wasteful to rational minds. Patricia proposed a radical approach based on these ancient insights and human military experience. Instead of trying to protect every world and system, they should create strategic killing zones where Harvester forces could be trapped and destroyed. This would mean deliberately sacrificing outer rim territories to buy time for civilian evacuations and military preparations. The plan involved turning entire star systems into massive traps using gravity bombs, quantum mines, and weaponized stellar phenomena. The council chamber erupted in outrage at this suggestion. The Bruthan war chief roared that his people would never retreat from any enemy regardless of the odds. The concept of abandoning territory went against everything their warrior culture believed about honor and courage. The Valdari found the idea of deception psychically disturbing because their telepathic society valued truth and direct communication above all else. The suggestion that they should lie to enemies or use misdirection tactics was almost impossible for their minds to accept. Other species raised practical objections about the economic and political costs of abandoning entire sectors of inhabited space. The trade routes, shipping lanes, and industrial facilities in those regions represented centuries of investment and development that could not simply be written off. Patricia remained calm during the heated arguments and waited for the shouting to die down before responding. She acknowledged their concerns but pointed out that conventional thinking had already failed against this threat. Every species that tried to fight the Harvesters using traditional methods had been completely erased from existence. The debate was interrupted by urgent reports from the galaxy's outer rim, where the first major Harvester attack was already underway. The Altarian hegemony controlled 3 star systems in that sector and had assembled a massive defensive fleet to protect their worlds from the approaching threat. The Altarians were proud of their military traditions and had never lost a major battle in over 2,000 years of warfare. Their fleet included some of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from stellar plasma cannons. Real-time sensor data showed the Harvester forces engaging the Altarian fleet in what should have been an epic space battle. Instead, the entire engagement lasted only 4 hours before all Altarian ships simply vanished from sensor readings. No debris fields or energy signatures remained to indicate what had happened to them. The Harvester entities then moved to the Altarian worlds and began the consumption process that the ancient warnings had described. Within 12 hours, 3 entire star systems were completely stripped of all matter, including planets, moons, asteroids, and even cosmic dust. Empty space remained where billions of lives had existed just hours before. The council chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The Altarian military had been one of the strongest in the galaxy, and it had been eliminated without apparently causing any damage to the attacking forces. Jake stood up and addressed the stunned council members with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. He explained that Earth Command had already begun implementing Protocol Omega, which was humanity's desperate plan to fight an enemy that conventional weapons could not harm. The protocol involved evacuating human colonies to hidden fortress worlds while turning abandoned systems into elaborate death traps. Small human strike teams would use guerrilla tactics to harass Harvester forces and gather intelligence about their capabilities and weaknesses. Jake requested that Earth be given temporary emergency authority to coordinate the galactic defense effort using human tactical doctrines and strategic planning. For the first time since the crisis began, the alien representatives were too shocked to argue about territorial pride or species superiority. The Valduri ambassador spoke for the council when he gave humanity permission to implement whatever strategies they thought might work against the Harvesters. The decision was unprecedented in galactic political history, but desperate times called for desperate measures. As Jake left the council chamber, he carried the weight of an entire galaxy's survival on his shoulders, knowing that humanity's unconventional approach was their only hope. Jake Morrison stood before the assembled representatives of 12 galactic civilizations in the great council chamber of Nexus Prime, feeling the weight of billions of lives depending on his next words. The Harvester fleets were advancing on multiple fronts, consuming entire star systems faster than anyone had thought possible. Traditional military strategies had proven completely useless against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each victory. The emergency session had been called after reports came in that the Harvester forces had split into dozens of smaller fleets moving toward inhabited worlds throughout the galaxy. The entities were no longer following the predictable spiral pattern that Jake had identified earlier. Instead, they were attacking seemingly random targets, which made it impossible to predict where they would strike next. Jake activated the central holographic display showing the current tactical situation across the galaxy. Red markers indicated confirmed Harvester presence, while yellow zones showed areas under immediate threat. The map looked like a disease spreading through healthy tissue as more systems fell silent with each passing hour. He began his speech by acknowledging the desperate nature of their situation and the failure of conventional military responses to slow the Harvester advance. The Altarian fleet had been one of the strongest in the galaxy, and it had been eliminated in hours without causing any apparent damage to the attacking forces. Then Jake delivered the words that would define humanity's place in galactic history and change how every species viewed the young civilization from Earth. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's translation systems as he declared that the time for battle has come, but not the kind of battle that anyone expected. He explained that Earth had been secretly preparing for this day ever since Dr. Hamilton first discovered the ancient warnings in the frontier ruins. Human colonies throughout the galaxy had been quietly constructing hidden weapons platforms, stockpiling antimatter charges, and training civilian populations in guerrilla warfare techniques that most species had never imagined. The plan was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. Rather than trying to protect every world, humanity would create massive killing fields where Harvester forces could be trapped and destroyed. Entire star systems would be booby-trapped with gravity bombs, quantum mines, and weaponized stellar phenomena that could tear apart space itself. Evacuated populations would retreat to hidden fortress worlds that had been secretly prepared over the past 3 years. These refugees were located in regions of space that most species considered worthless, including areas near black holes unstable, nebulae, and systems with dangerous radiation levels that would hide them from Harvester sensors. Jake revealed that human strike teams were already in position throughout the galaxy, using modified civilian freighters and mining vessels that had been converted into weapons platforms. These small, fast ships would harass Harvester forces using hit-and-run tactics borrowed from every major conflict in human military history. The alien representatives listened in stunned silence as Jake described operations that violated every principle of conventional warfare they understood. The plan involved deliberate retreats, false surrenders, and tactical sacrifices that would have been considered cowardly by most galactic military traditions. Commander Steve Foster had already led the first successful strike against a Harvester scout fleet near the Vega system, using exactly these unconventional methods. His task force consisted of 3 modified cargo ships loaded with fusion warheads and equipped with experimental stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to advanced sensors. Foster's ships approached the Harvester entities by broadcasting fake distress signals and pretending to be damaged civilian vessels fleeing from the combat zone. When the crystalline beings moved in to scan the apparently helpless ships, the humans detonated their warheads at point-blank range. The attack did not destroy the Harvester ships, but it forced them to retreat and reconfigure their defensive systems. More importantly, it proved that the entities could be surprised and damaged if unconventional tactics were used against them. Dr. Alex Turner had made another crucial discovery while studying the sensor data from Foster's attack and comparing it with information from the ancient ruins. The Harvesters were not completely invulnerable but existed partially outside normal. space-time, which made them extremely difficult to target with conventional weapons. Turner's analysis revealed that the entities could only be permanently destroyed when they were pulled fully into normal reality through massive gravitational distortions. This required precise timing and coordination between multiple weapons, systems firing simultaneously at specific quantum frequencies. The revelation explained why the first Vigil warnings had emphasized the need for unconventional strategies, and why direct military confrontation always failed. The Harvesters operated according to principles that most species could not understand, which made their behavior unpredictable to rational tactical analysis. Jake explained that humanity's military doctrine was uniquely suited to fighting this kind of enemy, because human warfare had always involved opponents who were stronger, faster, or more technologically advanced. Every major victory in human history had come through adaptation, improvisation, and willingness to use tactics that seemed illogical or wasteful. The other species began to understand why their traditional approaches had failed so completely. The Kronek relied on technological superiority that meant nothing against enemies who could absorb and redirect energy attacks. The Bruthen used direct assault tactics that played into the Harvesters' strengths. The Valdari coordinated their forces telepathically, but the entities seemed to exist outside normal mental patterns. For the first time since the crisis began, the alien representatives started accepting human leadership and tactical guidance. The proud Bruthen war chief asked to learn stealth and ambush techniques that went against everything his warrior culture valued. The telepathic Valdari requested training in deception and misdirection strategies that they found psychically disturbing but tactically necessary. The Kronek began modifying their advanced weapon systems based on human improvisation principles and guerrilla warfare requirements. Other species contributed their unique capabilities to support human tactical plans, even when those plans seemed to violate logic and military tradition. Jake authorized the activation of hidden weapons networks that human engineers had been secretly building throughout inhabited space. Gravity bombs were positioned near major star systems, while quantum mines were placed along shipping routes that Harvester forces might use. Weaponized stellar phenomena were prepared in regions where enemy fleets could be lured and trapped. The plan required massive coordination between dozens of species and thousands of ships operating according to human tactical doctrines that most aliens found difficult to understand. Jake established command centers on fortress worlds where mixed crews of humans and aliens worked together to coordinate strikes against Harvester forces. As reports began coming in of successful ambushes and tactical victories against smaller Harvester fleets, Jake realized that their unconventional approach was actually working. The entities seemed confused by strategies that violated their understanding of rational military behavior. But the Harvesters were learning too, and their main fleet, consisting of millions of ships, was beginning its final approach toward the galaxy's core, where most civilized worlds were located. The real test of human tactics would come when they faced the full strength of an enemy that had destroyed entire galaxies. The final battle began not in the depths of space, but in the strange realm between dimensions, where reality itself could be twisted and reshaped. Jake Morrison coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history from his command center on Nexus Prime while watching sensor displays that showed millions of Harvester ships approaching the galaxy's most populated regions. Dr. Alex Turner had discovered the key to victory, hidden within the ancient ruins that Dr. Hamilton had found on human frontier worlds. The first Vigil had not just left warnings about the Harvesters, but had built a weapon that could trap the AI entities in normal space long enough for conventional forces to destroy them. The weapon was a network of quantum resonance devices spread across dozens of star systems and activated by a specific energy signature. The problem was that someone had to get close enough to the Harvester command entity to trigger the resonance network while surviving the massive gravitational distortions that would tear apart space itself around the activation point. It was a suicide mission that required precise timing and absolute commitment from whoever volunteered to carry it out. Captain Nicole Parker stepped forward when Jake asked for volunteers to pilot the sacrificial mission. She had commanded the exploration vessel UES Defiance for 8 years and had never lost a crew member under her command. Nicole understood the mathematics of the mission and knew that she would not survive the quantum collapse that would destroy the Harvester command ship. The plan required her to navigate through the enemy fleet using stealth technology and reach the exact center of their formation, where the command entity coordinated the attacks of millions of individual ships. She would carry a payload that could create a localized gravity, well strong enough to pull the Harvester commander fully into normal space, where it could be destroyed by conventional weapons. Jake watched from his command center as the combined fleets of 12 galactic civilizations moved into position around the Harvester armada. The alien ships followed human tactical doctrines that seemed chaotic and unpredictable, but were actually carefully coordinated to create maximum confusion among enemy forces. The Valdari used their telepathic abilities to coordinate feint attacks that drew Harvester ships out of formation. The Chronic deployed weapon systems based on human improvisation principles that fired unpredictable energy patterns. The Bruthen learned to use hit-and-run tactics instead of their traditional direct assault methods. Smaller human strike teams moved through the battle using modified civilian ships that looked like harmless refugees fleeing the combat zone. These vessels carried quantum mines and gravity bombs that they would detonate at precise moments to disrupt Harvester formation patterns and create openings for larger ships to exploit. The battle raged for hours as galactic forces gradually wore down the outer layers of the Harvester fleet using strategies that the entities could not predict or counter. Every time the crystalline ships adapted to one type of attack, the combined forces would switch to completely different tactics that violated military logic but achieved tactical success. Dr. Hamilton monitored the quantum resonance network from her position on one of the hidden fortress worlds where civilian populations had been evacuated. The ancient devices were responding to the battle energy and building toward the activation threshold that would trigger the galaxy-spanning trap the first Vigil had built millions of years ago. Captain Parker began her final approach toward the Harvester command entity while space itself seemed to twist and bend around her ship. The gravitational forces generated by the massive crystalline being were beyond anything in normal physics, and her vessel's structural integrity warnings screamed constant alerts as metal and energy systems strained against impossible pressures. She transmitted her final message to Jake as the UES Defiance reached the activation point at the exact center of the enemy formation. The message was simple and proud, stating that she was honored to serve humanity and the galaxy in this moment when courage mattered more than survival. The quantum resonance network activated simultaneously across dozens of star systems, creating a galaxy-wide energy field that pulled every Harvester entity fully into normal spacetime. The crystalline beings suddenly became vulnerable to conventional weapons as they lost their ability to exist partially outside reality. Jake coordinated the final assault as thousands of ships from 12 different civilizations opened fire on the trapped Harvester fleet. The entities fought back with desperate fury, but they could no longer absorb energy attacks or phase out of normal space when conventional weapons targeted them. The Harvester command entity was destroyed in a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through hyperspace and caused the entire enemy fleet to collapse into quantum static. Captain Parker's sacrifice had triggered a chain reaction that eliminated the threat that had destroyed entire galaxies throughout cosmic history. The victory came at an enormous cost that would be felt for generations. Dozens of star systems lay in ruins from the fighting, and billions of lives had been lost during the Harvester advance. The galactic economy was shattered, and entire civilizations faced the challenge of rebuilding from almost nothing. Jake stood in his new office as first speaker of the Galactic Council, looking out at stars that sparkled with the light of reconstruction efforts throughout inhabited space. Humanity had been elected to lead the galaxy not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through their ability to adapt, unite diverse species, and win battles that should have been impossible. The other species now understood that human tactical thinking represented something unique in galactic civilization: the ability to improvise under pressure, find creative solutions to impossible problems, and sacrifice individual glory for collective survival had saved not just their worlds but the entire galaxy from extermination. General Woods had been appointed supreme commander of the new Vigil fleet that humanity was building, to watch the galaxy's borders and ensure that no similar threat could ever catch them unprepared again. The fleet would use human tactical doctrines and mixed crews from all member species working together, according to principles that valued adaptability over tradition. Dr. Hamilton continued studying the ancient ruins to unlock more secrets left by the first Vigil. while Dr. Turner worked on improving the quantum resonance network that had made victory possible. The technology would serve as a permanent defense against any future invasion from entities that existed outside normal space-time. Jake reflected on humanity's journey from dismissed newcomers to protectors of galactic civilization as he reviewed reports from reconstruction efforts throughout inhabited space. The price of victory had been higher than anyone wanted to pay, but it had proven that when the galaxy needed heroes, humans did not just answer the call but redefined what heroism meant. The galaxy would remember that when conventional wisdom failed and traditional strategies proved useless, a young species from a small blue planet had shown everyone how to survive against impossible odds through courage, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the future of all civilized life.